Today, we're diving into something truly fascinating in this explainer. We're going to look at how the very architecture of artificial intelligence is actually mirroring the human brain. But in doing so, it's essentially splitting our technological world into two drastically different futures. On one hand, we've got these massive, incredibly expensive macro monopolies. And on the other, well, there's this radical counter-movement towards micro-empowerment, where you can literally build your own digital brain. It's basically a showdown between giant, centralized systems and small, highly personalized local teams.
To really understand where we're heading, we kind of have to start with this stark reality check from physicist Sabine Hassenfelder. Look, we all love to imagine this utopian future where everyone just has a $50 a month super-intelligent AI at their absolute beck and call, right? But Hassenfelder points out something absolutely crucial: physical limitations. We're talking immense energy and hardware bottlenecks, coupled with just intense economic pressures, are fundamentally altering who actually gets to use top-tier AI. The raw cost of running these immense systems means that priority access isn't necessarily going to go to you and me.
So we're caught in this tension right now. We have these massive, globally restricted mega brands controlled by a select few versus small, personalized local brands that we actually control ourselves. Are we just going to be left waiting in line for a heavily restricted corporate AI, or are we going to build systems that empower us individually? To figure that out, we first really need to understand why these massive AIs are becoming so restricted in the first place.
All right, let's kick things off with part one, the AI megabrain monopoly.
To get why this monopoly exists, we have to look at the physical constraints that are driving it. Current large language models have this major flaw called catastrophic forgetting. It's kind of like studying for a massive exam, learning a new chapter, and suddenly completely forgetting the chapter you just read. To solve this, developers are building world models that learn continuously, much like human evolution, and they're developing these neuromorphic chips. This is where the software's purpose physically aligns with the actual hardware designed to save energy. But, and here's the catch, when you fuse hardware and software into these incredibly complex megabrains, they become ridiculously difficult and expensive to copy or run anywhere else.
And as you'll see, this creates a very clear trajectory. Escaping high training costs leads to specialized hardware, which then forces this massive megabrain architecture. And because these megabrains are just so centralized and powerful, they suddenly become matters of national security. Case in point, the US government recently demanded that Anthropic block global access to its newest model, Fable, restricting it literally only to US citizens. So escalating costs inevitably lead to highly restricted models, where governments can actually ban your access.
Which brings us to part two, the multi-agent rebellion.
But, every action has a reaction. Just days after the US restricted Claude Fable, a company over in Japan dropped a radically different architecture called Sakana Fugu. And Fugu circumvents these export bans entirely. Why? Because it's not a giant single megabrain. Instead, it acts as a manager organizing a room full of specialized open-source models. When you ask it a question, it doesn't just give you an answer. It might grab 3 different AIs, have them literally argue and fact-check each other's work, and then hand you the polished final product. It's a highly functional team, not a single brain, making it almost impossible for a government to just switch off.
Now you might be thinking, okay, setting up a whole room of AI agents sounds like I need a PhD in computer science. Actually, no. It literally takes just 3 simple copy-paste commands in your computer's terminal. First, you drop in your API key, which, let's be real, is just a private password. Second, you paste a command to let the AI install its own tools. And third, you open Codex, which basically acts as the digital desk for your AI team to sit at and start building. 3 simple commands, and you've completely bypassed the global megabrain monopoly.
So how does this scrappy local multi-agent team stack up against the highly restricted American megabrain? Well, in a stunning 5-round battle using the exact same prompts, Fugu actually won. Look, Fable 5 did win on pure visual polish for a weird storybook website, sure. But amazingly, Fugu tied on coding a playable 2D game completely from scratch, and it absolutely dominated the rest. Like, during the design critique, Fugu didn't just build a standard landing page, it acted like an elite, high-paid design consultant explaining cognitive load and color contrast before generating a fully interactive, live-updating checkout flow. It's wild.
But it's round 5 that's the metric you really need to pay attention to. Fugu was tasked to run a full equity research war room on the company Reliance. It seamlessly coordinated an analyst, a valuation expert, a bull, a bear, a fact-checker, and a judge. It generated a live dashboard with interactive scenario labs where just moving a share price slider recalculated all the financial models in real time.
To put that into perspective, for a human analyst, this depth of work usually takes 2 to 5 full days. This local AI team, they did the entire thing in a few minutes, and for just a couple of bucks.
Let's move on to part 3, building your digital clone.
So this really proves that immense power doesn't just belong to the megabrains anymore. And that brings us perfectly to tech entrepreneur Dan Martell's 6-step framework for joining the top 0.01% of AI users. It starts pretty simply. Upgrade to a premium AI model so you aren't stuck with the slow, outdated versions. Next, you install a local knowledge base. Martell uses a free tool called Obsidian. Why? Because it uses plain text markdown files that AI can easily read, and it visually maps connections, exactly like a physical brain. Then, you give it an identity, wire it up, feed it data, and just let it compound.
Now, we all know that awful generic corporate robot voice, right? To prevent your AI from sounding like that, you have to ground it. You create 3 markdown files right there in Obsidian. The user file tells the AI exactly who you are, your job, your frameworks. The soul file dictates the voice. You tell it to talk direct, challenge you, and use no hedgy words like hope or maybe. And finally, the identity file defines the AI's specific role, perhaps as your chief of staff or an accountability coach. You can actually even have the AI interview you first to write these files itself.
Let's dive into part 4, automating your second brain.
AI definitely needs context, but just throwing a giant pile of raw data at it creates total noise. By organizing your data into these 7 distinct folders, you're mimicking the distinct functional centers of a human brain, kind of like how we have separate physical lobes for motor function and vision. You create specific homes for people, projects, decisions, companies, meetings, daily logs, and knowledge. There's also this optional 8th folder, an Ant folder, for maps of content to pull together messy, complex topics. The crazy part, structuring your data exactly like this pushes the AI's accuracy in answering your personal questions from around 60% all the way up to 85%.
Okay, now you have to actually feed the brain. But, and this is key, you do not feed it raw data. A real human brain filters out millions of useless data points a second, like the temperature of the room or the hum of the AC, and it only keeps what actually matters. You need to do the exact same thing here. You use tools like Granola to auto-transcribe your meetings, but you instruct the AI to extract only 4 specific things: decisions, commitments, preferences, and key insights. It skips all the small talk entirely and drops only the pure, necessary context straight into your Obsidian meeting folder.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, memory consolidation. This is where it gets incredibly cool. When we humans sleep, our brains don't just turn off, they synthesize the day, consolidate information, and prune away useless memories. Well, you can set up your AI brain to do the exact same thing. By running an automated cron job, which is literally just a scheduled background task, at say 11 a.m. every night, the AI wakes up, reads your entire vault, cleans up unlinked orphan files, builds brand new connections between people and projects, and readies a custom briefing for tomorrow morning. It literally wakes up smarter every single day.
And finally, part 5, reclaiming your AI future.
So the core dichotomy of this whole explainer is pretty clear. The sheer physical and economic costs of AI are actively pushing global models to become highly restrictive, massively expensive megabrains used mainly by huge corporations and governments. But at the exact same time, open-source multi-agent systems and localized markdown vaults allow you to build an incredibly powerful, deeply personalized ecosystem of your own. You really don't have to be a billionaire to have a genius assistant. You just have to know how to structure your own local tools. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The actual technology to build a multi-agent team or a self-compounding digital clone is sitting right in front of you today. It takes only a few dollars and a few terminal commands to start. So, the question is, as the major tech powers continue to build these massive fortresses around their megabrands, will you just wait outside the gates, relying on whatever they allow you to use? Or will you start wiring up your very own digital brain tonight?